So to help us with our measurement of what this place is and how it's evolved and what's still the risk out here, we get these little Geiger counters, and this is measuring the microsieverts, I think that's what they're calling it, which is the idea of how much radiation is still in the air and the ground around here. As we get deeper in, remember we're only 18 kilometers out, we're going to see this thing jump up a little bit more.
In 2014, we sold all of our possessions,
Quit our jobs, and set off as a family for a one-year adventure in Costa Rica.
The 1 year was not enough.
so we rolled up our sleeves and figured out how to make this journey continue.
We are WorldTowning.
Join our family,
Largo,
Jessica,
Avalon,
And Will, as we travel the world
to connect deeply to local cultures, go on epic adventures,
and grow closer as a family.
Good morning from Ukraine. Today we are doing what we consider probably our most risky adventure so far outside of Gallipoli, and that's the reason we don't have the children with us, because children under 18 are not allowed.
We're visiting the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster area, the exclusion zone, and on April 25th, 1986, reactor number 4 was set aflame based on a really bad test that was done, and today we're going to go visit. In 1980, the Soviet Union generated only 5% of its electricity from nuclear power, but they had a grand plan to increase that number to over 30% by the year 2000. At the center of this plan was a Chernobyl nuclear power plant. This plant was to hold 8 reactors and was to be the model for nuclear energy for the rest of the Soviet Union. The first reactor at Chernobyl was completed in 1977, with 4 others coming online in the following years. But then, on April 26, 1986, at the number 4 nuclear reactor, a routine safety test had gone awry, resulting in an uncontrollable chain reaction as the nuclear reactor core began rapidly overheating, leading to an explosion. Our tour today will take us inside the 30-kilometer exclusion zone, where we will see abandoned areas, observe the site of the explosion, and get an idea of what this planet can do when humans abandon what was once a thriving area.
Now we are next to the zone, so the Chernobyl Exclusion zone is in front of us.
So we're now at the exclusion zones, and there's a checkpoint, and we're going to go through it.
And then to enter into this zone, you actually have to have your passport. It has to be very official. It has to match your registration passport numbers. It's incredibly official. You can't just drive in. There's no drones allowed in here, no guns, obviously no drugs, that kind of stuff.
And no packages
Yes, I've got
Pringles.
the breakfast of champions here, guys. I'm so embarrassed. And then she just warned us about how the bathrooms are disgusting here. So
I hope you're relieved for a little
I
while.
have to go in the bush.
All right, so we're about to go inside.
After getting behind the gate of the exclusion zone, we were given a sensor to help detect the total amount of radiation that we were exposed to during our visit. In addition, there was an ominous feeling having been checked over by the Ukrainian military. The reason for the strict military presence is because of the live plutonium that is still present in the exploded reactors. But before we got to the site of the power plants, we explored the abandoned areas.
So the first town that we're taken to is the city, or the town of Zalisa. Now we're within the entire containment zone. We're 18 kilometers from the power plant. This place right here it hasn't been touched in over 30 years. Now this is supposed to be one of the more tame areas. When we get into Pripyat, the actual city where the people lived, we're going to see it even more. But what we're seeing here is just, it's incredible.
Right now we're entering into what was formerly a hospital. And this is our first building that we're going into. And what I've learned so far is that they're not maintained at all. So if this is someplace you want to visit, you need to come now, because unless the government steps in or UNESCO steps in, these buildings are just going to fall down, and the history that goes along with them is going to go away as well.
So inside some of these houses, essentially what you see is the rubble that is left behind. There's this paper scattered everywhere. I asked around, asking whether the tour guides or the tour companies just leave stuff here for dramatic effect, and they said absolutely not. In fact, sometimes people take things from here because they want a souvenir from Chernobyl or the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. But look at this. I mean, there's dolls left behind. There are bottles of alcohol that are emptied, but essentially they're still just sitting there. The glass panes, half of them broken. It's crazy.
So one thing you must know about this area is that you need to wear long sleeves and have your ankles covered. And if you're coming when it's 70 degrees, find something lighter. I've got my Uggs, my yoga pants, my sweater, I had my leather coat. I don't know what I was thinking. Wow, it's hot.
We will just drive through the Red Forest, which is another burial site.
As we moved a bit further into the exclusion zone, we started to realize that this was not just a place with old abandoned buildings. This area was still contaminated from the explosion, and we started to register higher than normal readings on the Geiger counters we were provided. We made another stop to check this out further.
So my counter is going off here because right in this spot, it's very radioactive underneath the soil. And the number continually keeps going up. And once I walk away, the beeper will stop and the number will settle back down to the rest of the area. It's not dangerous for me to be here right now. It's underneath the soil, but also I would have to stand in this position for years for it to actually have some effect on me. And there's no cheese and no bathroom, so I'm not going to do that. If you listen, you can hear all the detectors going off. We are now 4 kilometers away from the actual spot where the event happened. But before we make our way there, we're going to go check out a kindergarten.
Gopachi, which is where we were standing at the moment, was contaminated by fallout and has been abandoned since the explosion at the power plant. All the houses were torn down and buried as an experiment. The kindergarten and one other brick building are the only architectural structures that remain standing. All other buildings were bulldozed. The government did not recognize the fact that these highly contaminated buildings and houses would seep radioactive isotopes into the water table. Burying the buildings drove radiotoxins deeper into the environment. Other villages in the exclusion zone faced a similar fate, thus polluting the aquifer.
This is an example of a local house. And if you look, so the toilets are not maintained for people who come. And we're in our second building, and I'm in utter shock. A piece of history, as well as an opportunity for all of us to learn about the effects of nuclear energy.
All right, so we're now being led out of the vehicle and we're going towards atomic lunch, essentially. There are still people who work here. The containment still occurs like every day of the week. So we're gonna go where the employees eat.
Just to clean up radioactive stuff off our feet. I'm heading in. Oh my gosh.
And now Jessica's gonna see if she's actually contaminated or not. Remember, we have kids we had to go home to.
I'm always contaminated with something.
Green is good. Green is good.
It's not doing anything. Am I doing it right? I'm clean?
Clean? Okay.
Clean. Okay. Let me take that. Let's see if Will's clean. Will, you barely fit in there.
Yeah, I'm clean.
Wow, you were clean really quick. That's the first time.
Yum, it looks inviting, Jess.
It feels like my high school cafeteria. I hope we're having chicken patties. Those were always my favorite in school. Vegetarian, it really doesn't matter. It looks like that might be herring in there. Is that herring?
So atomic lunch was not that bad. It was, well, it didn't look that healthy to start with.
Yeah, but she sold it as not being too good, and I actually was pleasantly surprised, or maybe it's just because it's 2 in the afternoon. I'm starving, but the coffee machine wasn't working.
Coffee machine does not work. Well. We've got problems.
And we still have like 6 more hours on this tour.
The locals don't like to be recorded. That's, well, it's not a problem, but it kind of got annoying after a little while.
So here's the thing about the locals, or if I guess you kind of call them locals, the people that work here, there's about 3,000 people that work here. here. They work 15 days on, 15 days off. And what they do is they stay here in dormitory-style living for the 15 days. And then the other 15 days, they go home and spend time with their family. They live nearby, but because there's such a big kind of quarantine area here, it's not that easy for them to go home.
So they have like no
every night.
commute for basically 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing, we have been told that it's safe for them to be here and work here at this point, that they're not in danger. What I thought was really interesting is that because it is the kind of zone and it's got the reputation it has, even though it is not dangerous for them to be here, I would have thought that these would have been very highly paid, like, sought after jobs. They're not. They don't
get
make
paid
a lot of money
here. No,
yes.
Unfortunately. We're now stopping to enter into the checkpoint for the Pripyat town. Now, this is the town that was where all the employees of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant lived. This was like a paradise for the Soviet lifestyle. They had the entire place decked out with swimming pools, with playgrounds, with gyms. It was supposed to be like the utopian experience that all Soviet citizens would ever want to have. This is what they dreamed of. On that early morning of April 26, when that fateful explosion occurred, a large amount of energy was suddenly released, and immediately followed by an open-air reactor core fire, which released considerable airborne radioactive contamination for about 9 days, which precipitated onto parts of the USSR and Western Europe. As firefighters were battling the explosions and the blaze at reactor number 4, life went on as usual for almost a day in the neighboring town of Pripyat. Aside from the sight of trucks clearing the streets with foam, there were initially few signs of the disaster unfolding just miles away. The fire gradually released about the same amount of contamination as the initial explosion. It wasn't until the next day, April 27th, that the government created a 10-kilometer radius exclusion zone and began the mass evacuation of Pripyat's 50,000 residents. Residents had 3 hours to pack up their things and board a bus for the exodus from their homes. They were told they would be away for just a few days, so they took very little with them. The exclusion zone was increased to 30 kilometers shortly after, when a further 68,000 persons were evacuated from a wider area. Most would never return. So we're at the site of Pripyat Hospital, where essentially everyone who was tackling the flames, and there was the first responders to the actual Chernobyl accident, they were taken care of here. Now, the doctors here, everyone was kept in the actual dark as to what was happening here. No one knew what was happening because there was a massive Soviet cover-up. They just thought that there was some smoke in the distance, but they didn't realize that it was an actual nuclear disaster at this point.
And actually, there's only 30 documented deaths from the actual event that took place. Clearly much more died, but it was only the ones that actually came to the hospital, were seen by doctors, and had the direct immediate effects from the activity that were documented. So clearly there were many more deaths.
And they're now buried in Moscow in like lead sarcophaguses because they're still just radioactive. And then the rest of the people who died, they essentially said they died from natural causes.
Heart disease, liver. It just happens to be a chair with stirrups out on the front lawn, so they probably threw it out of the building. Those are people's apartments.
Sentenced to 10 years.
So the question becomes, why here? Why build a power plant in this area of the Ukraine, or in Ukraine period? First, the land was not good enough for agriculture, so they weren't going to use the space to grow anything. Second, there were plenty of trees around so that they could use the trees to build things. And third, it had access to water, which means they would have a place to cool the reactors. Now, in the 1960s, they started developing the area, building the roads and kind of getting the infrastructure in place. And in the 70s, they installed the first power plant in the Ukraine ever. And then after that, every 2 years, they added a new reactor to the community. This was a place that people wanted to come. They called it paradise. It was desirable. It was the new age way of living.
walking right now in the main drag of Pripyat, and right there is City Hall. Essentially, if you look over here, there's a massive hotel, which on the top floor, there's a gorgeous panoramic restaurant, which then the military would be like right below because you had a main view of the actual reactors. And then look at this, the Grand Boulevard just had all of this behind it. It's all grown over now. You sit and you wonder, and well, you don't sit, you walk and you wonder. You can't sit here because if you sit here, they actually say that it's illegal. We have cameras and we have everything else with a tripod, but we can't put the tripod on the ground because that's also deemed illegal. But nevertheless, you walk around here and you realize that life is fickle. I mean, one bad mistake and next thing you know, everything is just abandoned. Everything is just taken over, and there's little you can do about it at this point. Check out a Soviet grocery store.
Look at all the shopping carts. I guess those things can withstand anything. So we've always heard about Soviet grocery stores being like one aisle and not much variety and just kind of, this is massive. I can't imagine what it was like in its heyday. I mean, it's huge. It looks like there's a variety of signs listing different aisles and different types of food. And I think it was the place to be, the grocery store.
So we're about to walk straight to an area that is right on the Ferris Wheel that has a Geiger counter meter that is, well, the hottest that we're going to see in all of Chernobyl.
So I think it's staying over by it. The Ferris Wheel right here is an actual symbol of the community, and unfortunately it never opened because it was supposed to open May 1st and the accident happened before that. So it's a very, very important icon for this area and for people that visit.
Black crosses, you see, over there, two black to measure it like this, horizontally, not like that, just like this. This is the most sensitive part of your Geiger. Okay, so right now it's 0.8. Now I will be maximally close to the hotspot, but I will not touch it. You don't do that as well. So let's try to find some radiation.
What we saw at this spot was a radiation level of 250 millisieverts, which is more than double the amount at which a human is at risk of getting cancer. We were only there for a moment, and there are only a few of these spots on the tour with readings like this. It is really impressive how the Earth just reclaims the land. We are only 33 years outside of when the actual Chernobyl disaster happened, and they left this town totally untouched. And the Earth is just totally gathered itself and said, yeah, this is my territory, this is not yours, I'm gonna take it over, and everything is falling apart now. Basically, it's like the Earth is just healing itself little by little, little by little. That is cool. Now, if you think about the way things are today, a lot of urban planners are like planning stuff like this. Everywhere you go, there's trees and shrubbery, nature surrounded by concrete. I don't think this is what the Soviets had in mind when they designed this area, but right now, this is like, if you go into some parts of California, they wish they can design things like this nice. Prior to the 1986 Chernobyl incident, about 120,000 people lived between the towns of Chernobyl and Pripyat. Now the immediate area surrounding the former power plant is virtually devoid of human life. Though the disaster released radiation levels 400 times that of the Hiroshima bombing, nature has experienced a resurgence. Research now shows that there are more animals present on the site than prior to the disaster.
To the right from the new cell confinement is reactor number 3, covered with rusty roof. In the middle ventilation step.
So this right here behind us is reactor number 4, the one that blew up in 1986. And what they did was, once they realized that it was burning, it was on fire, and they had to sort of shut everything down, because essentially they had to do it to start the containment process, is that they built a massive sarcophagus that went on top. And once that was there,
they built another one over the top of it. Now what they have is they don't have any real permanent solution, so they keep just building additional ones on top of it to contain it so that it doesn't affect people further on.
And in the meantime, they actually reignited reactors 1, 2, and 3. So they kept on producing electricity even after they started the containment process.
And I think they closed the last one sometime in the 2000s, so that was pretty recent.
During the accident, steam blast effects caused 2 deaths within the facility. In the ensuing site crisis, 134 firemen and site workers were hospitalized with acute radiation syndrome due to excessive doses of ionizing radiation, of whom 28 died within months and approximately 14 suffered radiation-induced cancer deaths within the next 10 years. So in the aftermath of everything that happened, essentially the Soviet Union needed a fall guy. They needed someone to actually take the blame of what happened. The firefighters were painted to be the utmost heroes, and they needed who? But basically the administrators to go ahead and take the blame. So the people who worked the control panels, the chief engineers, etc., they were sent to prison. Whether they had the actual real blame or not, they just had to take the fall. It was mostly just because it was the Soviet engineering of the nuclear reactors which caused the whole disaster to happen. But in response to everything that you see here, 10 years after the disaster, the firefighters here in Chernobyl, who were still monitoring this area and helping with the cleanup, they erected this statue behind us, which basically says the heroes were not just the firefighters, the heroes were everyone involved, including the administrators, including the engineers, everyone who did their part to help either stop it happening or stop it from happening.
The Chernobyl disaster is considered the worst nuclear power plant accident in history, both in terms of casualties and cost. Estimates of the eventual total deaths in the decades after the incident vary from 4,000 fatalities when solely assessing the 3 most contaminated former Soviet states to about 9,000 to 16,000 casualties when assessing the total continent of Europe. Decontamination efforts of the surroundings ultimately involved costs estimated at over $68 billion in 2019, adjusted for inflation. The accident prompted safety upgrades on all remaining Soviet-designed RBMK reactors, of which 10 continue to be operational as of 2019. As full-time travelers, we get to see a lot, but our visit to Chernobyl touched us in a special way. We walked away with the realization that as humans, we think we own this planet, and everything is ours for the taking without recourse. We try to make intelligent choices, but sometimes things go wrong. Our lesson is to work with the planet as opposed to against it, as we migrate towards clean, renewable energy. This planet will thrive. The question is whether it will do so with us or in spite of us.
What a day, guys. I hope we did it justice. Now, back when I was a kid, my parents were part of an organization called No Nukes. And I learned from a very young age that anything nuclear, if there's a problem and something goes awry, it can be horrific and disastrous. Then Chernobyl happened, and we talked about it in school, and I watched it on the news, and I thought, my gosh.
You were 2 years old when Chernobyl happened, right?
No? Yes. I was 2. I watched the news. Okay, I was a bit older. But thank you for that sweet compliment. And I still thought about this event and thought, how horrific. But today, we walked on the ground and the space and saw the remnants of what was towns and cities that were completely just gone and void of humans within hours of this happening. And I'm totally depleted of energy right now.
It's crazy to think about. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, that's okay.
It's crazy to think about how what was once a symbol of like the horrific things man can do has now become a massive symbol of how if you let go, the earth will just take over and make it better again.
I think that's a really big takeaway, that everyone in our group today really felt like, wow, look, we as humans did this horrible thing, and I know it was an accident, but we still did this horrible thing. And everyone left and just left the place, and the earth happened, and the trees grew, and the birds came back, and everything replenished itself. And I think there's a really, I'm not going to get on my soapbox here, but let's let the earth be and do its thing and not ruin it, and magical things can happen, I think.
And that's really amazing. And you know what's really amazing right now?
What?
That our battery light's going off on our camera. So we really have to wrap this up.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for hanging
so
out.
much. I know this wasn't one of our typical peppy.
And go clean renewable energy, because that's the way of the future anyway.
I hope we did it justice. I really, really do. It was a profound experience for us.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you guys.
On WorldTowning, and goodbye.
Bye.
Okay.
In the next episode of WorldTowning, we have a final day in Ukraine before we head out to Poland.
We basically got ourselves a late checkout from the hotel, so we're going to utilize every single ounce of hotel space, hotel breakfast, hotel everything that we can, including hotel parking. So there's a museum not too far away from here, although we can't walk to it because it is too far. But
If you're not yet subscribed and you're enjoying the daily vlog, do it now as we continue to share all of our adventures.
So now we're going to feed the catfish. But if you come here, you cannot fish. It's prohibited. So don't bring your fishing pole.
they're radioactive fish. Are they glowing?
They're not glowing. There's a lot of them, though.
Meant to be catfishing.
I guess when I thought about us coming here, I didn't think I'd see much plant life or fish or animals or anything like that. I was wrong.